Before you create your first project, I'd like you to be familiar with the workspace of Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2014. And actually, you have options when it comes to the workspace, otherwise known as the interface or the layout. If you navigate up to the word window here at the top, mouse click and select Workspace, you'll see here there are several options. I'm currently in the CS 5.5 option, but I'd like you to select the editing option. This is the default interface or workspace that when you first install Premiere Pro CC 2014 and you launch Premiere Pro, this may come up. I wanted you to be aware of this because not only do I want you to know you have options, but I also wanted you to know that I will not be in this workspace for the remainder of all the lessons found in this training series. And as a matter of fact, I don't use this workspace when I'm editing for a project either. Although it is here and it does seem to work fine, it's just not been my personal choice. The reason, I believe, is incrementally the previous workspace has a better feel and a better layout. I know you can change this anytime you'd like while you're editing, and you can adjust the size of any one of these windows to create a custom layout or workspace, which we will be covering in a different lesson. But this overall, incrementally, is just better. And I believe you'll agree with me at some point throughout your editing career that this particular workspace / layout or interface is just better. So with that said, let's begin our tour and let's talk about the 5 main windows you're going to be working with in Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2014. So let's start in the upper left-hand corner of my workspace. And you can see here I have all these different items here, and these little folders are called bins. And basically within these bins, I have video clips, I have audio, graphics, my DSLR footage, and even photos. In fact, there's photos in both of these bins here. I organize all my assets as best I can before I begin to edit. As a matter of fact, I make sure I have all my assets before I edit my project. And of course, that's a personal preference. But here in Premiere, you can organize these, and I can tell you that the better organized you are, the smoother your editing will go. And this is where you begin. You begin to organize everything here in the project window so that your editing does go a lot smoother. Now, another item I want to bring to your attention is this item here, which is my sequence. This icon here represents my sequence down here, which I'll talk about that more in just a moment. But you can create as many sequences as you'd like within your project. And I happen to have just one for now, but basically this represents this sequence here, and you don't want to delete this, especially if it's the only sequence you have. But that represents my sequence within this overall project. And of course, any one of these items here will lead me to the next window that I want to talk about. So I'm going to double click on this item here, which is a video clip that has audio. And that opens up in the source window. And the source window is where I can preview and manipulate my media. So for instance, if I just want to watch, I can push on the play button here, push it again to pause or stop that from playing back. I can mouse click on this playhead and drag it left or right to scrub through that clip. And I can preview the media before I commit to bringing it down into my sequence, which is where we'll build our movie. And there are some other tabs above here that I'll talk about in just a little bit, but let's move over to the program window. And the program window is where I can look at my movie as I assemble it down here in the sequence. And basically both of these windows here have similar tools here at the bottom, where if I want to play the media that's in my sequence, I can push this play button here or pause it. And the same with the tab or the space bar, not the tab, the space bar on my keyboard. If I push that now, it'll play. Whoops, I had my source window selected, which is also another important thing. Notice how there's a blue outline that represents what window you're in. And you want to click on that window to activate that window, meaning if I wanted to play this particular video clip, I would now push the play button. And of course, that is playing the items down in my sequence. So that's important to know because that indicates what window you're in. By clicking on it first, then you go to work within that window. And you would know that by this outline here. Okay, so with that said, let's move down to our sequence. I'll click on that first. And basically the sequence, as you can see here, is where you build your movie. From left to right, your clips will be assembled a lot like a sentence. You start with your first clip, second, third, so on and so forth, and you build from left to right. And anything above this center divider is a visual item, like titles and graphics, video clips and photos. Anything below this center divider is an audible item. And of course, music, voiceover, the audio that possibly was recorded while you were capturing video with your camera. So that would all reside below this center divider. A couple things regarding this sequence. Of course, you have your timecode reference up above. You have a playhead here. This playhead is linked to this playhead here. And over to the left are where all the layers are, and you can create and add or delete layers. These blue items we'll talk about in a little bit, but you can see all these little different items and icons that are within every one of these layers here, and we do talk about those in different lessons. But I do want to bring one of these features to your attention. If you navigate up to this little wrench icon here, click on that. These are all the items you can turn on or off that are represented in your sequence. And one I do want to turn on is the expand all tracks. When I do that, notice how it opens all the different elements within my sequence. And this is very handy, especially as a beginner editor, especially when you see there's a little thumbnail here that's represented for each video clip, which makes it handy to quickly reference which or what video is where and what's within each clip. Down below, these are little waveforms that represent the different volume of the audio. So for instance, within this video clip, I have one mono track of audio, and which is in the left track, nothing in the right track, which we'll definitely be talking more about that as we move along in our lessons. But basically, when you click on that item, expand or minimize, you have a choice as to where or what you see within your sequence. Of course, there are a lot of other choices here, and I would ask you to, at some point, explore these different choices here, and we will be coming back to some of these. But this particular window has a lot of nice features that you can turn on or off, which is our sequence window. And you'll probably have a preference at some point. And we do cover these in preferences and the setup lesson as well. The other item that I want to talk to you about over to the left now is the media browser. And the media browser is where you can preview your media before bringing it into your project. So for instance, within my project drive here, I went to the media folder and then I went to the video clips. And once I click on this folder, I can see all the different items within that folder. And it takes a moment just to refresh. But while that's doing that, basically I can park my playhead over any of these clips and take a look. I can actually preview the media by moving my playhead left to right. Let's go to this one here. And it'll allow me to basically scrub through the clip, which is really, really handy. I can look at it before bringing it into my project, and I can do that to any one of these clips here, which is real handy before committing to importing it into the project. Now, if I wanted to bring this into the project, I could mouse click and drag it up, and then that would officially import it. Or mouse click and drag it to the right. That would also officially import it. Or I could double click on it, and when I double click on it, that means that I can preview it without importing it. I can mouse click on this playhead and scrub it, which is real handy because I may not like this clip. I may discover something about the clip that I don't want to use. And that helps in speeding up the process of deciding what media I want to use for each project. While I'm back in the source window, I do want to point out the other wrench here. I spoke about the wrench earlier in the sequence. This wrench here, quite handy. If I mouse click on that, I have all different types of options here. I can bring up my scopes, waveform vector, histogram, and really utilize that for color correction. But there are a lot of different options here that I can look at. As a matter of fact, I can look at the audio that's associated with the video here. And although you can only do one or the other, meaning I can only look at the video and or the audio separately, but not together. More on that as we do our editing. But basically, you want to make sure that in this little tool here, when you select it, that it selects or that you're on the composite video. And you'll see here that all these main windows have a toolbar. And there's a lot of good stuff over here too that we'll be talking about more as we go through our editing. But I wanted to bring that up since I spoke about it down here in the sequence. Okay, so the media browser, I spoke about that. The effects tab is where you will utilize effects such as transitions and filters and lots of good stuff here. And we don't talk about every single item here in the effects only because there's just so many, and same with transitions. So you will want to at some point explore all these different options. But these are the two main tabs you'll be working with in Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2014, especially the media browser. Very handy. Okay, a couple of other smaller windows I want to talk about. This toolbar here, very, very handy, of course. This has most, if not all, the tools that you'll be working with in Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2014. So for instance, if I click on one of them, like this blade, and I navigate over video, it becomes active. If I'm not hovering over something that it's applicable to, a red slash will appear through that tool, indicating you can't use it. And when you're done with the tool, you want to put it away, right? When you're done with tools, you always want to put them back, especially a blade. You don't want to be running around with a blade in your hand. So the way to do that is to click on the arrow tool, which is your selection tool, and I'll call that your hand, basically. You just got rid of that tool. The shortcut is the letter V on your keyboard. You can push the letter V, and that would instantly put the tool back. With that said, I want to go over here to the far right. I want to show you this guy right here, which is very handy for a visual reference as to the audio levels within your sequence or within your source monitor. So I'm going to park my playhead here where the audio is kind of low. Notice as I scrub, mouse click and click on this and drag this playhead that I can see the audio visual reference that shows me the level of that audio. If I push the play button, same thing. That works both in the sequence and above here in the source window. Notice that there's only one channel of audio there. And that's also very, very handy, very accurate window to utilize. Last thing I want to talk to you about are the tabs up above. If I happen to have a filter in any one of these clips and I double click on that to bring it up into the source window, if I click on the effects control, you'll see here that I have a three-way color corrector on there. And not only that, I can manipulate the motion of this particular clip here, which we definitely talk about in a later lesson. I can also manipulate the audio from the sequence here. We'll be talking about that as well. And then if there's any metadata information that I want to look at pertaining to this video clip, this is also very handy. But these tabs up here, once these items are down in the sequence, become alive. And you can use these to manipulate the media that's in your sequence. Okay, well that's it for the tour. Let's move on to the next lesson.